Hello, Soulfire. Welcome to Wednesday evening Ask a Medium. It is wild already. So, just so you all are aware of how fun this is going to be, we'll just let me explain kind of where we are in this process. Oh, I'm hearing myself on somebody's. You might have it pulled up. Okay. So Molly can't hear me, but she can hear Chrystopher. So this should be a lot of fun. But we're excited. So Chrystopher and I went live a little bit earlier. I don't even know if Molly knows we went live earlier, but Chrystopher and I went live earlier and kind of talked about, our topic tonight, making contact, and we're super excited. So I'm going to let Chrystopher introduce himself, tell us more about him, and feel whatever you feel you want to share.
Okay. Katie's here. I used to work with Katie, and I think you might know Katie. But I am Chrystopher. I'm an Astro-Medium and empathic energy intuitive, and basically that just means that I'm psychic and I'm really into astrology. So I also have had a lot of extraterrestrial, I don't like using that word, but or extra dimensional is much better, okay, if we want to be galactically correct. So the whole point of this video, any questions you all have, I'm going to have an answer for everything. I'm going to have resources for everyone to go research this stuff. I want to get into some science. I love to bridge the gap between spirituality and the cosmos because it's all one, and also demystifying this whole contact experience and what it means to have lineage to other star systems, and what it means to channel beings not from this star system, what channeling is, all of that. Because the more our audience knows about this, the more they come to the conclusion that it's possible, the more our consciousness will expand as a whole, and they're able to get to us more as a collective.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's so important to connect. And where I think it might be fun to start is with maybe our stories that we were talking about earlier, how we booked this about 2 months ago.
Yes.
And then we had our experiences. Now for me, so if you don't mind, I'll share my experience and then I'll let you jump in, and then you may be able to tell Molly what we're talking about.
Yes.
So I had I was in a journey in Richmond. No, not Richmond. We were near, I guess, Red River Gorge. It doesn't matter where. It was in Kentucky, and we were on a journey, and I was laying outside, and so I could see like what'd you say?
When was this?
It was in May. It was in I'll look at an exact date, but it was in May. I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
But
it's important.
Okay, I will look while you're talking. I'll look and see what the date was. So okay. I was, I saw a couple of spaceships. You could see them like hover and the lights going around. They kind of go back and forth.
I can't hear either one of you.
Before.
I don't think she can
just
hear.
Just sent you a thing.
Oh, okay.
Fuck Mercury
She's
retrograde.
Coming back. Oh, okay. So I'm laying outside and I'm looking at the stars, and the whole night I'm looking at the Big Dipper. And the whole night I'm like, oh, Big Dipper, Little Dipper. You guys, I don't even know the difference between the two. So let's just be like, there's a dipper. And so so I'm looking at the dipper all night. And I go out, and mind you, I had been keeping my eye on a couple of spaceships, one hovering where I could see through the trees. We'd had some experiences, but when I was out there, and all of a sudden, when I was out there, it was like the sky was black. There are no stars. What happened, right? So then all of a sudden, it's like pop, pop, pop. It was all spaceships lighting up. In this black sky, I couldn't see the stars. I was like, there are hundreds. Now, I will tell you this too on top of that, and then I want to switch to you and let you kind of take over. When I have been in healing, I have seen that our Earth is protected by spaceships in a vision, in a healing vision. And so I know that that's possible, but I've connected a little bit with Rochelle today, and we were talking about that. So those are my experiences. I've seen things in healing. I had this experience. I've had a couple of others, like seeing spaceships, in the sky. But tell us about your experience, and let me check in right quick. Molly, can you hear either of us? She can hear
I
me
can
now.
hear you.
Molly, can you hear
I'm
either
not
of us?
sure. I can hear you both. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear her?
Sweet.
He can't hear you, but
Like,
Chrystopher. Okay, okay. So Chrystopher, tell us. Go ahead and go into that. Let's see if the sound rectifies itself. But tell us your experience and kind of take over.
okay, so I had quite a few different types of experiences. I've had experiences where I've had dreams, and then when I've woken up, I didn't know who I was, as if I wasn't in the right body and that kind of thing. So as if I had astral projected or something like that. That was kind of what started all these things several years ago. But last year, while I was meditating outside, and I opened my eyes and I look up into the sky, and there is a star. Okay, so it looks like a star, and a lot of times they will look like a star, but it's moving in a perfect straight line very slowly. I mean, to me it was slow. I'm sure out there it was moving rather quickly. It was not in our atmosphere, because there is a certain you can tell when something is in our atmosphere, and this was not an asteroid or a shooting star. This was emitting its own light. Okay, and this was moving in a straight line across the sky. Well, I had never seen anything like that, although my father has had experiences like that, which I do think is significant, because we may have DNA. In our DNA, there may be lineage to a specific race or society of these beings. And but I called my mom immediately, and I was looking up at the sky while I'm talking on the phone with her, and I'm like, you will never believe what I just saw. And then immediately this flash of light, it was as if somebody took like 3 fingers and made a stroke through the sand. I don't know how else to describe it. And it went downward, and it was made of light, or like 3 angels just flying together. I don't know how else to describe it, but I drew a picture of it right after it happened, because I was so taken aback by it, and still kind of in disbelief about it. So fast forward to about a month ago, in late May, I'm at a cabin in northern Georgia on a vacation, and I'm with a friend. Thank goodness, because this shit always happens when you're alone, right? But we're in the hot tub together, and we're just talking, and I look up in the sky, and there are trees over here. I can't tell what the audience can only see what's going on right here, okay? So there's trees over here, but there's this huge opening, okay? And so I see this thing moving, and I recognized it immediately. I was like, this is not a plane. Trust me, I've seen planes and gone, oh my God, is that it? And then you look long enough and you realize it's not, and then, okay. They flash. There's certain ways it looks when it's in our atmosphere. This thing looked like a star and was smaller than some of the stars, but is moving in a perfectly straight line way out there, okay? And it gets to a certain point, and I'm looking at her and I'm saying, can you see it? And she's like, I can't see it. I can't see it. And so I keep pointing at it. And then finally, when she goes, I can't see it for the last time, it, what they called powered up. And so what that means is that it's kind of like turning on the dimmer, or in theater when they would brighten the spotlight, before a blackout or something like that. It was exactly like that. It got really bright, and then it just disappeared. It didn't keep going. It completely disappeared into thin whatever. And an asteroid cannot do that. Trust me, I got on my little computer and I just looked up every possible, because before I come out on a platform like this and say some shit like this, I'm going to do a little bit of research and possibly debunk it, because I do not like people just coming out here and being like, my God, I saw this and I have contact. I want to be real, and I want people to take us seriously. So that has been a couple of my experiences. One more thing I want to talk about to people, and there may be people watching who have something similar going on with them. But first of all, if you're extremely interested in other races, first of all, you cannot be racist on this planet and communicate with other beings from another star system, you're not there yet. And it doesn't mean you're below where we are. It just means your level of comprehension and your consciousness is not up to speed with the vibration that they need you to be at for them to reach you, okay? Because some of them do not hold physical form or do not exist in our dimension the way that we do. So for them to interact with us, they would have to do it telepathically in the dream time, during astral projection, and if they were to create a physical form, or those who do have a physical form, I will get into this later if you all remind me, but some of them, their energy fields and their physical bodies are, the cycle per second is what that's called, their vibrational cycle per second is so high that it would cause disruption in our energy field. And they're very mindful of this, not because they want to be nice, but because they already know that they're made of the same stuff that we are, and that they are made of the same energy, not in a religious way, in a consciousness way. But one thing I do want to talk to people about, okay, Rochelle says, I have seen alien beings come out of my closet. Rochelle, we believe you. You should be on this video, for one. But we'll probably do.
I'm about to send her a guest link.
So, oh God, I mean, if we get
So
more
wouldn't be
people
able
on
to
this
hear.
party and then she can't hear me, oh dear God. So, just want people to be mindful of one other thing, that this is going to sound kind of scary, but it's the concept of implants. Okay, so it is the concept that something has been implanted in your body. And this is not a bad thing. You're not being tracked or traced like cattle. It isn't like that, okay? But, and I only knew this from my own experience and from some documentaries that I have watched. And some of you, I mean, you all can go watch these online. If I can find it again, I just remember watching it last year and coming to a realization. But one morning I woke up when I was 12 years old and I had a mass, a little tiny, like a BB gun bullet, maybe a little bit smaller, under my tongue, and it's still there, and it's been there ever since. So we thought it was a salivary stone, but salivary stones usually get passed, or they're very inflamed, and I did a lot of research on salivary stones. When I had my wisdom teeth taken out in 2012, the dental surgeon was supposed to remove that. And I woke up and it was still there. And he acted like, oh, we'll bring you in for another appointment to do that. And I went to go to the other appointment, my car broke down. So I always thought that was curious, but never really thought anything of it until I saw a documentary last year about a man who is very connected extra-dimensionally to a certain race of beings, and he says that he has this mass under his tongue on one side, and he can push it down and flip it around, and I can do that too. I can push it down right now and it'll disappear. I won't feel it until I suck through a straw or suck on my teeth. It'll pop back up and it'll just stay there, and it doesn't hurt. But what they'll do is they will take your flesh or your skin and they'll wrap whatever this is, and we have to understand that some beings may be using some type of metal or alloy, but other beings may be using something that we could not even detect with our visible light spectrum or with our instruments, or they would be using some type of material that we absolutely don't have on this planet or in our dimension even, okay? Not just this planet. But with that being said, they do that and they can be implanted into the arm and different parts of the body, and a lot of people have these things and don't realize it, or don't realize that's what it may be. And I'm not saying that people should automatically go, oh my God, I've been abducted by aliens. Abduction in and of itself, I'd love to talk about that if you all have questions about that later. It isn't an abduction. They don't have to abduct you to do these things, okay? This gets really sci-fi and magical, and it doesn't seem possible, but I can break down the science for how all of that is possible and where I got that information as well.
So I'm in the dental field. I mean, I'm not anymore, but I'm a dental hygienist.
Yes, I know.
And this is not the first time. Now, I did not hear about this until after I was done, because you better believe I'd have been in everybody's mouth being like, you got one? You got one? Let me lift your tongue up. Let me see. Let me grab hold of that. So I love the dental field, but you are not the first I've heard this from. And you and I have not talked about this, which is really cool. So I just wanted to give you my input on the dental hygiene side. Molly, you got any input?
As far as implants?
As far as anything you want to share.
Well, I'll be honest with you, and I'm assuming Chrystopher still can't hear me. We're having another one of
Can you hear Molly yet?
Tech support rodeos over here.
I'm waiting for your translation.
I'll keep you posted on what. Yeah.
Okay. So she's got questions. Hey.
And before you get going, Molly, I just want to say
experience. I think I lost Jess.
You all seem to be having a great time.
Can you hear me?
Oh, no, I can.
Well, what's funny is we haven't gotten anywhere just yet because we've been going back and forth on who can hear.
Okay.
So
who can
I'm
hear
going to shut up and I'm going to let Molly talk.
So for me, this is new territory. I've been opening up more and more to the idea of extra dimensional beings over the past couple of years. This is my awakening has been kind of a slow and steady path. And so, coming on board with the idea of extra dimensional beings was a slow start for me. But it is something that has been dropping into my field more and more over I would say the last 1 to 2 years, as well as understanding my own extra dimensional lineage, something that Chrystopher and I talked about in a reading recently. And so, I'm learning more and more. I'm very, very curious, regarding, the subject of mediumship. I'm very curious about channeling extra dimensional beings.
Okay. So Chris, Molly was just telling us this is dropping in for her, this, making contact in general, but it has been showing up and she's curious about, and I also want to acknowledge that we'll have a question here. Those of you asking questions, I will get to those a little bit in probably about 15, 20 minutes. But Molly wants to know about how this happens, with mediumship and channeling interdimensional. Did you say that's the best way to put that?
Or extra dimensional.
Extra dimensional.
Because they hold a form.
Okay. Cool.
So you're wanting to know how it interlaces with mediumship and channeling.
And channeling.
Okay.
So and channeling those extra dimensional beings.
Yes. So where everyone should start with this at some point is the teachings of Bashar. So Bashar is an extra dimensional being that is channeled by a man named Daryl Anka, and everyone needs to go watch the documentary First Contact on Amazon or his website, bashar.org, I believe. I got a lot of my information from him and a lot of my terminology from him, but then a lot of other things I put pieces together from quantum physics and from metaphysical places. But it all really begins, another great place to start if you're more scientific is Joe Dispenza, because he has several books on consciousness and the mechanisms in which to induce altered states and other states of consciousness using your pineal gland, using principles of Kundalini yoga or yogic principles. So really it comes down to the pineal gland, the third eye, and your crown chakra, that connection. Your pineal gland has to be decalcified, stop drinking tap water, and it needs to be enlarged. But I will tell you, if you are having a third eye opening, or if you go through an experience where you begin to take more light into the third eye or into the crown chakra, it can be horrifying. So people look at all this, it's like, I want to connect with aliens, and it's like, there's a price you pay for a certain extent, and the price you pay is opening all your wounds to be healed. And some people did not choose to come here to do that. They came here to wound or to limit and not heal, so that's a very specific experience. But mediumship, for instance, when you are more physically focused, so mediumship before 2012, okay, so there is a specific, the Mayan calendar was not referring to the end of the world, it was referring to the end of the third dimension, okay? So this dimensional shift which has happened since then is opening mediums, because all mediums were doing were tuning to higher dimensional beings, okay, or disincarnate beings. And because of our evolution and our new chakras, because we have more than just the 7 now, and our third eye coming online into a new frequency range that we've never been into, we're no longer just receiving disincarnate beings, we're receiving the higher selves of people who are still in their physical bodies. We're receiving input from other star systems, animals, plants, because you got to understand that mediums of the past, or mediums of the third dimension, were channeling at the frequency range or on the channel that they were tuned to at that time. And so channeling, all channeling is, when you're playing basketball and you're making every shot, when you lose track of time, when you're riding and you have no blocks, you're in a channeling state. But the channeling we're referring to would be to let your ego, which is easier for some than others, letting your ego letting one part of your brain go to sleep and letting another part of your brain stay awake, which is not normal. We don't ever do that. The closest thing you get to that would be coming in and out of sleep. But in that state, you can allow another consciousness or stream of consciousness to channel or to imbue you with its ideologies and its intentions. And so that's all that's happening. And they are, most of them, very high dimensional, because there's so many of them. There's so many different races from different star systems. And if you get the book or you research Alchemy of 9 Dimensions and Barbara Hancock, you'll learn about the different dimensions. Or if you just learn about string theory and things like that, you'll learn how a lot of these things are possible and how this mechanism works.
So one thing I want to say is the Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, I was able to find that, probably is not as detailed as the book, but I was able to find that on Gaia.com. It's in 2 sections. And it felt like they were fitting a lot into 2 episodes. But just for those of you looking for another outlet on that, Gaia.com was, go ahead.
I love how Katie she's saying, yay, string theory. And it's because her sun sign is Taurus. So she's automatically going to love anything that feels good and sensual to her, like vibrations, but also anything that is been proven by fact, okay? Or at least is a theory and no longer a hypothesis. But if you go to Open Minds on Gaia, you can find Barbara Hancock's interviews about that, and it'll give you a great breakdown. And it is not easy to understand at first if you don't have a frame of reference, but you've got to start somewhere. And for those of you who've done channeling, and Molly, this is kind of what we're talking about, like Chris was just saying how you step aside. You know, it's like one part of your brain is off and the other is on. So the way that we channel spirit is the same way we're going to channel an extraterrestrial being. So I've done a lot of channeling. I channel higher dimensional beings, and it really takes a lot of trust. And it's me letting go of control. So, you know, I have to step aside. And so when you were talking about that, it just reminded me of like when I channel, like I take myself and I'm like, let me go over here in the corner and color, go play with the flowers, or go, let me stand over there and watch from there. And that takes a lot of practice. And Molly does channeling. So, you know, but it feels like, Molly, you know, the same way we channel spirit is just tuning into that different frequency. And I'm being told right now, like there are certain ones that we're not going to be able to reach. Yes,
is what I'm being told.
Right.
I was just going to say, just like there are certain spirits who a client might be coming to look for, but they don't resonate with you as the medium, and that may be a reason why they're coming through, and which is and not the spirit's point or their choice. It is your frequency. And so when you are channeling some of these higher dimensional beings, like people who channel angels and things like that, that is a different section of dimensional beings. And you have to have some type of frame of reference or to be able to even decipher. Like when Barbara Hancock was receiving the information from the Pleiadians, it came to her as a hologram.
I love that.
It took her 9 months in different channeling sessions to turn. She described the hologram as a large, I think it's a tetrahedron or an isosahedron in her mind and in her mind's eye, but even with her eyes closed, it was a specific shape. And this specific shape was the teachings of the Pleiadians. And she had to decipher all the angles, which every angle that it made was a specific teaching, if you will, similar to ancient Lemuria and Sumerians and ancient cultures of hundreds of thousands of years ago, pre-Atlantis even. They used symbology and shapes because, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm not going there. That's a whole different thing. But
next week on
that slowly, because that one shape was an entire lifetime's worth of information that could be downloaded. And ever since then, all but 3 of the dimensions or 2 of the dimensions have been verified by science, or at least hypothesized. And the one most recently done a lot of work on is the 6th dimension, which is kept by the Syrians, which is this dimension of geometry and sacred geometry. And these are there are many of them, but these are the feline beings.
That makes perfect sense. I'm a Leo and I connect to that. Like, how interesting.
Lions and cats and things like that. Many of our animals are not from this planet. They're from other dimensions. They were brought here hundreds of billions of years ago. We've had visitations from all types of beings. This planet has been cultivated. And when you say ships are protecting the planet, they are overseeing that certain things do happen in a way. They're not interfering. Some do interfere, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. Reptilians and small grays, I'd love to go into those. But like reptilians and things like that, we don't need to really go there because that instills a type of fear within us. But reptilians are just as scary as the guy down the street, okay? They're more physically focused. They come from other dimensional planets. They may be dressed up as us or looking like us, they say, and I don't know any of that for a fact. I haven't had my own experience with that, and a lot of it's fear-based, and I'm not going to go there. So, but we can talk about, the small grays and different types of beings and things like that, because it gives you an idea of because when we start talking about making contact, we're not meeting other beings from other star systems. We're re-meeting other versions of ourselves, and we are reuniting with our family because we are made of not just stardust. Yes, everything is made of the same energy, but we're actually biologically and genetically made of different types of beings. And I can go into that if anyone is familiar with Zecharia Sitchin's work in the Emerald Tablets.
So I feel like, Molly, I'll check in, make sure you don't have any questions, but I feel like I would love to hear about what the grays, and also, if you want to go into that, but I'll check in with Molly. And like, I'm ready for you to take over. These are great conversations. But Molly, do you have any questions before he kind of goes into that?
I don't at this time. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty over here, and that's why I'm being so quiet.
You look really pretty.
Here in the corner.
You look so good. So just keep looking pretty. And so I'm going to let Chrystopher take over. And then Chrystopher, at some point, after we talk about that, I'll get to some of the questions, or feel free to jump into the questions if you feel guided. Go for it.
So Did Molly have a question, or you couldn't hear her?
She didn't
You
at this
couldn't hear?
time, and you're on a good path. We
Oh,
like
okay.
what you've got
Yeah.
going. Yep.
Okay. So I do want to, I'm going to throw a lot of things at people, and you may go, this is so much. Well, it's always so much at first, okay? So let's start with about 400,000 years ago. This is through carbon dating, what we have, and this matches up with the timeline as well. Have either of you ever heard of the planet Nibiru?
No, Nibiru.
Nibiru.
Maybe.
So this, I don't know where this name came from, but we call it this planet. There is apparently a planet. There are many planets in our solar system that we cannot see, okay? And this is interesting, and we can go into this later in the video, but there are things called etheric planets. So these are planets that don't resonate in the third dimension, and they resonate in the etheric frequency. And as you begin to see etherically, which I can now, I don't know if I can fully, but I see prana, and I see things that I didn't used to see before, and that is etheric vision. And so there are planets that are in different places within the solar system. And as you raise your cycle per second, and as you become and you step into this new frequency range, those planetary bodies have a newer meaning, and they begin to have an astrological influence. But we will not go there, okay? There is, until later if you all want to, there is a planet called Nibiru, and it is way out there, okay? But for some reason, along this solar system's history, this planet got drawn into the gravitational pull of our sun, and it takes about 400,000-ish years for this planet to make its way around the sun, okay? The beings on this planet, called the Anunnaki,
That I have.
we all know that,
Yeah.
okay? So.
Yeah.
That is their planet, what we call them, or what we call it. The Anunnaki, apparently they are volcanic structures on this planet, and they live inside of that. There's a whole thing in the Emerald Tablets. So when you get into Zecharia Sitchin's work, he spent his whole life trying to get the scientific community and the historical community to accept the Emerald Tablets as something that happened, because these beings are represented in many of our ancient cultures, okay? These beings with the elongated heads and things like that. So these were not gods the way that we feel that Zeus and Hera and all of them were gods. They were called gods because they were more advanced beings that came from the sky, okay? Now the Anunnaki in the Barbara Handclough works, or the Pleiadian agenda, the Anunnaki rule the fourth dimension, okay? So they do have a physical form, and they are 2 arms, 1 head, 2 eyes. They're very much like us and many of the others out there. There is a cosmic blueprint that makes us look the way we do, okay? And, oh shit, not now. Not now.
Not at this moment. We're doing something else.
What was I talking about?
You were saying that the cosmic blueprint.
Cosmic blueprint. Okay, Nibiru. Okay. So, for instance, Nibiru has an elliptical orbit, I'm sure, just like many of our planets. So it doesn't go in a perfect circle, okay? And for it to take 400,000 Earth years to get around the sun, that's a long damn time. So at some point in the billions and billions of years, it made its way, and it passed, and it gets extremely close to Earth, okay? And one of these billions of years ago knocked into Earth, and knocked Earth onto an axis. And the remnants of that, you could call it accident, or it wasn't an accident, it was divine plan. But that's what the asteroid belt is part of our planet that has, or so they say. And then also the moon. The moon is a result of that cataclysm or that accident. And so the beings on this planet, when it got close, because they take so long to get around the sun, and they get so far away from the sun, their atmosphere is so unstable, and so they came to this planet to mine for gold because they were going to use gold particles to suspend it in their atmosphere to maintain the atmosphere. And we have now verified with science, because scientists have been using gold particles suspended over ozone layer holes. So the whole Zecharia Sitchin work and the gold particle, that's in the Emerald Tablets. In the Emerald Tablets of 400,000 years ago, where they talk about Enki and Enlil, the Old Testament God and the New Testament God. Sorry for all the Christians out here. I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just saying this is 400,000 years ago, not 2,000. So, but Jessica's smiling. But the whole, all of it's listed in there, and there's a lot to do with that when we get to the small grays, okay? So now we're going to go to the works of Bashar, because the being Bashar, which his name is not Bashar, they don't, go ahead.
Can you spell that? Bashar.
B-A-B-A-S-H-A-R. This is an Arabic word, okay, that means messenger or bringer of good news. Bashar. And so the Daryl Anka, who channels this being, has Arabic in his lineage. So that was the name that he and this being, because they're made of the same soul, that's what I want to get into. Really, I want to get into this. So the reason, because people ask Daryl, why you? Why did this being choose you? And he said, he didn't choose me. This was something chosen before either of us incarnated into the beings we are now, because I am his past life and he is my future self. Well, how are you all talking to each other then? Because time isn't linear and every life you've ever lived is happening now. So, and what gets even weirder is that Bashar is technically 300 years in our future, but not in our timeline. So there are parallel timelines. So if we were to travel 300 years into our future, Bashar's planet and Bashar would not exist. He exists 300 years in a parallel Earth's timeline, okay? And all this seems very sci-fi, but if you get into quantum physics and everything, you understand how all of this works. So Bashar talks about how he, not Daryl, but he, the being that we're talking about, is a mixture of Homo sapien, or human, as the modern human, and these small grays. He is a hybrid species. Sorry, I'm going to get kind of emotional. I don't know why. Okay. When I start talking about the hybrid children, I get really emotional for some reason. And, sorry. Shit. So, I want to start from the small grays, because these are the beings that are depicted in our Hollywood movies, okay? And they do look like that. They have no hair, their heads are much larger, their eyes are much larger, and they're black. They have 10 fingers, but they're more elongated, and they're small. They're about 4 to 5 feet tall, okay? They're within that range. Now, there are other beings that have been reported and have been depicted as well. These are the tall grays. So let's start from here. So I'd love to start with the Anunnaki, because that's where it all started apparently, but time isn't linear. So when I get to the end of this spiral, we're going to go back to the Anunnaki, and you're going to realize how, because of what the Anunnaki did and because of what the small grays did, they actually were happening at once, even though they are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years apart from our perception, okay? So, in a parallel Earth, in a parallel timeline, which Bashar talks about this timeline being available to us. And when he says available, we as individuals are choosing different parallel versions of ourselves constantly within every frame or frame per second that we're perceiving. But we're also, as a collective, choosing a timeline, okay? And 2020 is the year that we begin the choice of this timeline shift. And so the timeline was going like this, and now it's branching off. There will be those who remain in the third dimension. And then there will be those who create what we're calling the fifth dimension, okay? And we will take a dimensional jump, okay? Now, the beings who remain in this third dimension, they may not be the exact same timeline, but their timeline will be as follows. And this is what Bashar talks about. What happened was thousands of years in our future in this parallel timeline, human beings were so technologically advanced and they mined the fuck out of this planet, which they have every right to do. That's their timeline. They made their choices, okay? They destroyed the atmosphere. We're already seeing how that can happen here, but this is beyond our scope. We can't even understand it at this point, okay? You wouldn't recognize the planet at this point. So, but what happened is that they were so cerebrally inclined, so mentally inclined, that they actually evolved out of emotional states, out of feeling certain emotional states, and one of them being love. So they no longer felt love. That doesn't mean they were evil. It just meant that feeling, they procreated as needed. Okay, we've seen this kind of thing given to us in Hollywood movies, but this is a lot more visceral. Okay, and they not only did they evolve into a different, they were more highly mentally developed. Their telepathic abilities were out of control, but they didn't have the type of empathy and things like that. The planet ran on supercomputers, were already there with 5G, which that's another video. But what happened is their DNA strand, their double helix, mutated through evolution. And so they were no longer able to procreate. And the atmosphere was so uninhabitable that they went underground, because there are beings that live under our earth, and we're not going to go there now, but they went underground to begin a new civilization. Well, that wasn't working very well, and I'm condensing all of this. So oh no, where'd she go? Okay, there she is. Okay. So when they went under there and they realized that this is not, we need to create a new planet because their technology is way far advanced than ours, they mutated their own DNA to exist in different atmospheres and to jump dimensionally. So that mutation caused them to shrink a little bit. It sped up their evolution is how I believe it. But they mutated their DNA to be a certain way and to physiologically be a certain way. That's when their eyes got bigger and they became what we know them as the small grays. So then what they did was they set up a program where they went into different timelines and into different realities of Earth, and they went and found so let's say there's 100 of them. There were more. There's way more. But let's say there's 100 of these small grays that were sent out on a mission to get DNA from past humans who were still healthy and feeling love and were able to procreate, right? We're not the only dimension and only timeline they came into, but in our timeline, they came here, but people say, well, I was traumatized by it. It was the scariest thing I've ever been through. Why did they choose me to do that? I'm a victim to it. What they don't realize is that if you were, and this is just from the small gray perspective, if you were abducted by a small gray being, that was your future self. Yes, there was a contract, okay, and a ability to do that because there was an energetic and telepathic and soul connection. So that is the same thing with Bashar and Daryl Hancock, is he is channeling him because they're the same soul. So the channel already exists. They didn't have to develop a channel. Okay. Just like Abraham. Abraham talks about through Esther Hicks, Abraham is part of Esther's hot inner being. That's because what Abraham is a conglomeration of things that Esther is made of. So now we're going to go into the hybrid species program. So the small grays took our DNA and they mixed it with theirs, and they created the first batch, I hate calling it that, but the first batch of beings called the tall grays. So they're much more human-like. They're about 6 feet-ish, 5 to 6 feet tall. Their eyes are smaller, but still black, and they have more musculature. They look more humanoid, okay? These beings do contain a lot more emotional frequency, but they're not what they were necessarily looking for, okay? So they mixed their DNA again to about 50-50, because that was a 75% small gray, 25% us, 50-50, and they created Sasani beings. This is the sound that Daryl makes when he's saying this is what we are. Our planet is called Sasani, and we're called Sasani. It's sounds. It's his way of transmitting this frequency. And these beings are the hybrid of us and the small grays. But we have to remember that we're hybrids of the Anunnaki and Neanderthal Homo erectus. Okay, and I'll get there in a minute. So the Sasani beings are smaller. Their skin is very fair and sallow, but not gray. Their eyes have white in them. And they're rather large. And these beings mixed their DNA with ours again. And that hybrid mixed their DNA with ours again. And each one of them have a specific name. And now there are children. And they're called hybrid children, okay? And this is a huge community online, and I want people to know about this because a lot of us are their parents. And what is happening is these children are extremely spiritual, but they're very human-like. You will be able to tell the difference because of their eyes and because of their energy field. Their energy will not feel like anyone else here, and they will have a certain look to them, okay? But they look so human, and the reason they chose these beings to be children, they're training them in these space stations or spaceships. All that sounds really sci-fi, but they're training them to live on Earth, okay? And from Bashar's standpoint, if we choose the 5D timeline, the year 2027 is the year that the children will be returned to Earth. And they will live on sacred sites, because the sacred sites lay on ley lines, and the energy vortexes there will support their high frequency in their bodies as they acclimate to our atmosphere and to our density level in this dimension. The reason they chose them to be children was so that when we saw them, we were not afraid of them. And because they looked so much like us, it was a gateway into accepting someone else as our own. But you have to understand, the reason that all of this racial stuff is happening right now is, yes, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter conjunct, but it's getting all of that to the surface so we can clear that out, so we can then, not everyone will have access to these. They probably will be 2040, 2050 when the world knows about their existence and they make the news and it becomes commonplace that the hybrid children are here. But in the year 2027, people who are connected to them, their parents, the people like us, I'm not saying it will be me or you all, they will have access to them and will know of them and be able to interact with them, and they're already interacting. And it makes me emotional because this is a next level issue, okay, where we're going to have beings here that are not totally, they're made a lot of us, but they are all different colors too, and they are they look slightly different. They have certain abilities that we don't have, or certain children are coming in with, or certain things that we had to grow to have, they'll already have innately in them. Mediumship, channeling, astral projection, those are probably all things that they have within them already. And so I want to go back to the Anunnaki, because if the Anunnaki had not come here, and from Zecharia Sitchin's perspective, he believed that the Anunnaki created us from the Homo erectus to mine gold. We were a slave species. I don't necessarily believe this. Even if the Anunnaki thought that's what they were doing, that's the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament God. Enki was the one who wanted to enslave us in the Emerald Tablets, and Enlil, although he helped create us, he knew that we were beings and that we had intelligence and that we needed respect and that kind of thing. So that's where the whole damning God and the loving God came from, was from the Emerald Tablets. And it's represented in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and all of that. So gosh, there's so much to it, but does anyone have any questions about any of that?
I'm going to check on our questions. It was interesting. There were a couple things that came up for me. Wondered if you had seen the what show is this, like about the Kentucky Goblin, and if those like are little grays. I wonder if you haven't seen that. I'll have to look up what that. Okay, I'll look up what that show is. The other thing that comes up is Area 51. You want to? Okay, go there, and I'm going to look at questions. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, Area 51. So Area 51 has been Area 51, I do not believe, is housing extraterrestrial data and undercover stuff going on. I do believe it was used for that during the certain sightings or certain crashes that did happen. But the types of beings that they pulled out and that they apparently saw, these could have been a small grays. I don't believe so. These could have just been other beings. Have you all ever heard of the stranger at the Pentagon? Or have you all ever heard of Val Thor? Ooh, okay. So there are beings that live inside of Venus. And I know this seems really strange, and I still don't know yet through my research if they exist if there is a portal or a black hole inside of Venus, but these Venusians have come here and they're human-like, so they may be humans from another timeline, but they say they're from Venus, and you all need to look up Val Thor. He is somebody, he's in pictures. You can see the difference. He and this woman are extremely beautiful. They're almost perfect looking, and they came here. They can speak our language. I don't really understand it, but the whole thing's very interesting. Because when you go to Area 51, that's going into the 20th century UFO type of topic, and that's where Val Thor comes in, and all of that, which is totally fine and valid, and that was how those types of things were our way and their way of getting planting that seed into our consciousness. Because you have to understand, we were more developed in other ways thousands of years ago. After the medieval times and during industrialization and things like that, and science, we turned off a lot of things in our brain, and it had to be reawakened again.
Why are they showing me while we're talking about this like there's a portal in Area 51? There
may be, because of where it is.
That's what I'm wondering. And maybe that's why that came up, because that struck, like I was like, okay, I need to bring that up. And it's like they're showing me a portal, and it's came up around when you're talking about the ley lines. I thought, oh, maybe there's more to that than even we could put our hands on.
Arizona, New Mexico, places like that Bashar even talks about that. He will actually hover his ship over Arizona a lot because of the energy there, because there's so much quartz, crystal underneath. Okay, so it's about frequency. We think, oh, it's so woo-woo and it's so crystals and on candles and all that. It's about frequency.
Sure.
And they require a much higher frequency to exist, for them to physicalize or come into our dimension when they don't exist in our dimension. It takes a certain amount of intention, and I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I know, so we're going over just a little bit tonight since we got a little bit of a late start. I want to acknowledge one question, and then I want to kind of let you finish up. And I want, this is Katie Justice. She said, I met who I believe is my guardian angel. Is there any way I can find out her name? And I'll give you my input, and then I'll let Chrystopher and Molly give a little bit of their input, and then we'll finish up with you, Chris, if that sounds good. And we'll schedule another, because we're going to do this a little more often, I think. So Katie, for me, I work with angels, I work with guides, I do mediumship, and when I recommend connecting with your guardian angel or your guides, or even people who've passed, I recommend centering yourself through a meditation. You don't have to have a guided meditation, but I believe I have one on my YouTube. So you could go to jessicatanselle.com, click on my YouTube, and I have some guided meditations there. However, you can do that on your own, focusing on your breath and just asking your angel to come sit next to you, and you just listen, feel, hear, and see what comes to you, and just ask. And I will say this: don't second guess what you get, because any name they give you is okay. That is just your understanding of their energy. You're just putting a name to it. But there are some well-known angels out there that we do know. So definitely check in and get a name. And if you're struggling with that, reach out to one of us. I'm glad to guide you through that. But just let me know, and then I'll put together a meditation for you. Chris?
So I was going to trail off of that. These guardian angels, they do not have names. So we've given them names, just like we've given meaning to everything, okay? So we give meaning. Nothing out there has meaning or purpose until we give it that, especially if it interacts with us in our dimension. I also want to say we want to be opening our minds to the idea that this may not be of the Deva, is what they call that. That's where the angels resonate. But this could be extra dimensional in nature. It could be many other things. And I want to talk about, if you go into the Alchemy of Nine Dimensions and Barbara Handclough's work, they talk about the fourth dimensions. We have four guardians sometimes. Rochelle has something to say about that, as she should.
Yeah, tell her, go ahead. Tell her, type away.
Type away. But for anything above the fourth dimension to interact with us, it must penetrate the fourth dimension first. And the fourth dimension is where everything turns into dualities, okay? And that's where our human collective mind exists, is within the fourth dimension. So when people say that they see, I saw demons or I saw the devil, you could be seeing an angel, and because of your belief systems, you could be imbuing it with meaning that it does not actually have intention about, and it could incite fear within you if that's how you choose. Now we're talking about these beings up here. There are beings that exist within our frequency ranges that are more stable or more set in their form, so you would receive them as they are, okay? But we don't receive anything as it is. We perceive everything as we think it is. So I'm just saying, I don't want to de-romanticize it, because, and I also, these angels don't want us to feel like they're guardians because we need help. Because if you got into a car accident, let's be really real here. If you got into a car accident and died, great. Great. Like now you don't have to feel hurt or cry. I mean, trust me, when you die, you're going to go, oh my God, why was I so afraid of this? You're not going to say that at all. Everything is going to, you'll have access to everything until you incarnate again, but that implies linear time. But I'm just saying there's so many things that we put, like guardian angel, that's very three-dimensional to me, because we need help and we need them to save us from the evil that's out there, when the evil is in all of us. Okay, and what they are actually doing is you're communicating with them, and they might be interacting with you in a way, but you could be guardians for them in another star. I mean, we also calling it a guardian angel, we tend to put it on a pedestal as if it's higher than us, when it's us in the third dimension and in the lower dimensions that are out here doing the work. We're out here sifting through the data and having all the experiences that are sending the signals back to source, which is causing everything to get bigger.
There's so much we could talk about with this, and I'm gonna ask Molly if you have any input as well as on this topic or any other questions, and then we'll let Chris kind of finish out with whatever we finish out with. Let's find out. Can you hear me, Molly? Oh, I can't. Can you hear Molly? I can't hear you, Molly. So wave and look pretty. We love you, and I just want you to know that I'm so grateful for your beautiful presence. And I'm sorry, let me touch base on this last comment. She came to me in front of others, but nobody else could see her. She came to comfort me. She asked if I knew her. I said no, and smiled and said, "You will," and then she was gone. And then also that this makes sense to Katie. So good, Katie. I'm so glad. And Chris, why don't you just finish us out? Let us whatever else you feel you are guided to share. I'll let you finish us out.
So I do want to say that intention is so important. When you ask, well, I was about to say you receive, and I'm like, that's been trademarked already. Okay, when you ask for something, it is at least possible to receive, because the minute you tune to a vibration, a law of attraction will bring you more of that. So because of this conversation we're having, we are going to have more experiences. We are going to meet more people who are interested in it, and we are going to start to find, not only is Facebook listening to us on our phones, so we're going to start seeing more ads and stuff. That's another version of us mimicking the laws of the universe. But we're just going to start to have more experiences about these things and at least become more knowledgeable, because this knowledge is going to become more accessible to us. We might find a link. A friend might say something. A friend might think, I mean, there's going to be so many things that start coming to you because our point of focus right now is on this topic, but they really want it to be. There are children out there who are made of us, who are ready to come back and ready to help us ascend more. The ascension process is not just to get you to become this perfected human. None of us are going to do that in this lifetime. You're one of many lives until that happens, whatever that is. And honestly, that you're trying to reach is an end point when there is no end point, because it's all happening now. Because even if your soul reincarnated 12,000 times and got to the perfected point and no longer needed to be physical anymore, if that's how you choose to look at it from a more Hindu way, you know, where you no longer need to come back here anymore. When they want to come back here, we want to come back here. This whole playground was made for play, okay? It wasn't just supposed to be dense. I'm going with all of this because we all are all ascending, but part of the ascension process is being heavily influenced by these other beings, because they are our future selves, or they are connected to us in very spiritual ways. And the more they cannot reach us and embrace us into their galactic family and their galactic federation, if you will, okay? until we're able to receive them. And I would like to go back to one thing, just so everyone understands. Well, why don't they just land here? Why don't they just show up? Well, let's talk about that for just a second. So if, for instance, Daryl's experience with Bashar, he was given a dream, and in the dream, Bashar landed his ship in front of him and got out of the ship and walked towards him. And he said, as he walked toward him, the closer he got to him, the more fuzzy it became. And then when he got really close, when Bashar, the being, got close to Daryl physically, immediately Daryl saw himself through Bashar's eyes. And Bashar explained to him, my frequency rate, and this is quantum physics, it's coherence, a vibration that is a higher vibrating cycle. If it comes into a frequency range or in contact with a lower vibrating frequency, it'll grab it and it'll become a larger frequency. It'll become coherent. So all that happened, especially because they are past and future versions of each other, they are the same higher self, if you will. His consciousness swallowed Daryl's consciousness whole, and they became one organism. Okay? Not physically, but consciously. So he said also there are beings that if they come in contact with you, when their energy field penetrates your energy field, like empaths, it would cause spiritual awakening, and it would cause such upheaval in you that it would be so terrifying. And they're like, we're wanting you all to do this work on your own, and because you all are supposed to do it on your own. If you don't, then it's like you don't actually learn, and you don't actually embody that, and your frequency doesn't change. Your frequency doesn't change by listening to what I'm saying right now. Your frequency changes by listening to what I'm saying and applying it in some way, having your experiencing, creating a belief from that, and then replaying that belief over in yourself and creating a reality from it.
Yes. I mean, so everything you just touched on for me is manifestation. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, freaking we create our reality. So let's create it. If this is all an illusion and this is all just, so many lifetimes happening at once, then find joy and change the shit you don't like. So thank you. Thank you, Molly, for looking so pretty. So grateful for you. Molly, you look good. That's it. That's all we needed from you tonight, right? Chris, thank you for this. Chris and I will talk about doing this some more. And we're so grateful. Thank you, guys.
Yes. Bye.